part of it, if you go back, it's the failure of the Bay of Pigs and also JFK trying to make a missile deal with the Soviets. I mean, these are crimes that the Joint Chiefs of Staff found to be way beyond the pale. They looked at him as a complete communist. JFK, that is. I mean, we look at him as a moderate now.
Yeah.
The Joint Chiefs of Staff with Curtis LeMay and others looked at him as the weakest sister they could possibly have or ever had. I mean, think about the time. You're coming off of a guy named General Eisenhower.
Yeah.
Now you've got a guy who is a multimillionaire playboy. I mean, the difference is so enormous, the extremes of this thing, who wants to make a deal with the Soviets to reduce the amount of nuclear missiles in the world, while they want to launch an initial attack against the Soviets. He also pulls back air support for the Bay of Pigs invasion, making them lose their minds. They have a lot of motivation to kill him, Tim.
And he famously rejected Operation Northwoods.
He famously rejects Operation Northwoods, which is put forth by the Joint Chiefs of Staff to shoot down our own planes.
And blame the Cubans.
It's hard to explain today how big it was of a deal to have nuclear missiles 90 miles off the coast of Miami. I know it sounds like nothing, but it was a huge deal at the time. And to have a communist regime 90 miles off the coast of Miami, it came out of nowhere. It really did. Because at the beginning, Castro is someone who we thought we could do business with.
Yeah, we helped him.
Yeah, we helped him get into power. There's guys running guns.
Saddam.
There's guys running guns into Cuba. One of them is Jack Ruby.
So for those that are not familiar, and I'm going to go ahead and assume you all are, but maybe there's like 5 people who've never heard this. We got Operation Northwoods. Look at this. It's so true. Yeah. Even Wikipedia has it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's a proposed false flag operation that originated within the U.S. Department of Defense in the United States government in 1962. The proposals called for CIA operatives to both stage and commit acts of terrorism against American military and civilian targets and then blame them on the Cuban government. Use this as a justification for war against Cuba. The possibilities detailed in the document included the remote control of civilian aircraft, which would be secretly repainted as U.S. Air Force planes, a fabricated shoot-down of U.S. Air Force fighter jets off the coast of Cuba, the possible assassination of Cuban immigrants, sinking boats of Cuban refugees on the high seas, blowing up a U.S. ship, and orchestrating terrorism in U.S. cities. The proposals were rejected by President John F. Kennedy. How could this have gotten unclassified?
Okay, a lot of things get unclassified because the people doing the declassification are plebes who just work in that department. When they created the FOIA Act, the reason it was a nightmare was because the bigwigs didn't want to have to go through every goddamn file that was in there. So they just redacted the shit out of stuff, and the underlings had to deal with the government agencies that were requesting the files.
I just want to, point out as it pertains to Northwoods, this is the CIA and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I mean, this is DOD,
yeah,
the highest levels,
yeah,
proposing blowing up our own ships and planes and blaming foreign governments to get us into war. I'd also like to stress the Gulf of Tonkin incident, famously, was a false flag operation. And I think it was only in, 2010? Or it was only like 15, 20 years ago, they actually admitted it. So when I was younger, the conversation on the Gulf of Tonkin was considered conspiracy theory and you were nuts. And then at some point, it was like, no, actually, yeah, we faked that.
And that's LBJ, by the way.
Right. Interesting. To get U.S. involvement in Vietnam.
Well, let's just back up. I mean, JFK signs National Security Action Memo 263 in November of 1963, and that's for the reduction of the amount of troops that were already in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Once he's assassinated, while he's lying in state in the rotunda downstairs, LBJ signs National Security Action Memo 273 and says to the generals in front of him, you want your war, here's your effing war. And he gives them Southeast Asia as a proxy war, as a booby prize. They wanted to go to war with the Soviet Union. Wow. They wanted to use Oswald as a patsy, not to frame an innocent man. The framing of Oswald is because he had worked for us as a defector. they wanted to entrap the Soviets and launch a thermonuclear war against the Soviets and blame them for the assassination of John F. Kennedy. That was the original plan. That's why they faked Oswald going down to the Soviet embassy in Mexico City in September of 1963, Tim. That was David Atlee Phillips' plan.
So the CIA has done a whole bunch of messed up stuff in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s.
Don't forget the 50s and the late
2010s. There's been no reforms. No one's been held accountable, but...
Well, keep in mind the Church Committee in 1977 did hold them accountable, and there was quite a bit of pushback, and they were back on their heels.
What was the accountability, though? I mean, I know a lot was exposed, but did anybody go to prison?
No.
What was the accountability?
Although,
well, at least their budget, got nipped, and they were kicked back.
I don't believe
set
it.
Down a little bit.
I don't believe their budget got nipped. The Pentagon can't pass an audit. The Fed can't pass an audit. Somebody's funneling money somewhere.
Well, they had to go to drug operations. They funded it through black.
Richard Helms, the director of the CIA, was found guilty of perjury, and he was convicted of perjury for lying to the Congressional Committee.
Wow.
So there was something.
I think what we've seen over the past several years, not to jump too far into the future with Trump, I'll tell you one of the craziest things I've seen in my lifetime. When Eric Ciaramella blew the whistle, quote unquote, against Donald Trump in his first term, alleging that he made untoward or illegal actions pertaining to Ukraine. If you went on YouTube or Facebook and said the name of a CIA operative, Eric Ciaramella, YouTube would delete your video.
Wow.
Take your stream down.
Wow.
Facebook would delete the post without notice.
Wow.
Famously, Rand Paul was on the floor of the Senate and completely unrelated to the whistleblowing. He made reference to CIA agent, Eric Ciaramella, agent or whatever his position was. YouTube deleted the C-SPAN video.
Wow.
Now you tell me, under what rule structure or community guidelines were they deleting the name of a guy who works in the public sector for the American people who was the subject of massive public scrutiny? You couldn't even say his name.
Well, Arthur Kroc, who was the editorial director of the New York Times, famously wrote 3 weeks before the assassination of JFK that if a military coup happens in this country, it's going to come from the CIA. He wrote that in the New York Times. Also, in the Washington Post, right after the assassination, Harry Truman wrote an editorial saying that he made a mistake by creating the CIA and militarizing it. That was really the problem, was the militarizing of the CIA. Even Obama, when they were taking down bin Laden, Tim, the CIA had a plan to militarily take down and kill bin Laden, and Obama pulled the plug on it and went with the Navy SEALs. So he realized it was a problem. When JFK... Excuse me?
Of course, his mom worked there. He knew.
Right, his mom worked there. When JFK famously fired Cabell, Bissell, and Dulles, the three top heads of the CIA, the plan was to give it to the Defense Intelligence Agency, which was created by JFK to replace the CIA. No president really wants the CIA running around as a military operation, and no one knows how they became that. It kind of just by osmosis happened, where they began to use weapons on their own and weaponized drones much years later.
Bush
and even before that, they became militarized, Tim.
Wow. I just did a quick Google search for Eric Ciaramella. There's a story from the New York Post from 2024 from the Post editorial board, and they basically go over the history of what this guy did, and they say that when Donald Trump contacted the Ukrainian president and said, what is this? I'm paraphrasing, but it was the quote was almost something like, what is this video where Biden says he's going to withhold aid unless you fire a prosecutor? I want you to look into this. It's corruption. It's bad. Ciaramella blew the whistle and said Donald Trump was threatening Ukraine with a quid pro quo to dig up dirt on a political opponent, Joe Biden. Joe Biden did the same thing.
Yeah.
What Trump was looking into was Joe Biden telling the government, if you don't fire this prosecutor, the prosecutor who just so happened to be investigating the energy company Burisma, where his son was a board member, and where I believe it was Hunter had contacted the State Department only 3 days prior or something like this, saying, we need help with this. The prosecutor's coming after us. This guy, Ciaramella, blows the whistle. He's got a bunch of news stories about him. He should have a Wikipedia entry. So I think you guys that are watching right now, however many end up watching this episode, why don't you go just start putting a Wikipedia entry up for Eric Charmella and make sure the public record never forgets his name.
Well, I'll tell you something about Wikipedia. And this is a number of years ago. They had Oswald's rifle, supposedly, quote unquote, Oswald's rifle, the Mannlicher Carcano on the Wikipedia page called Oswald's rifle. And people who were hip to JFK research said that's not his rifle. It's shorter. It's got different side mounts.
This one?
Yeah, I don't know if that's the.
I just looked up
page.
JFK assassination rifle.
Right,
Carcano
okay.
Model 38.
Yeah. Anyway, so it went back and forth about the rifle with people pointing out that that's not the rifle. There was no scope on it. There's a lot of differences.
There was no scope in the
no
actual.
scope, my friend. Yeah.
So this has got a scope on it.
Yeah, there's a scope on it. He did buy a scope, but it was a shot that was too close to even use.
Yeah, if you go to Dealey Plaza,
it's so small, you don't need a scope.
How many feet away was the
35 yards.
It's
35 yards from the book
Oh,
depository?
no. That's about 150 feet down. So you're 150 feet in the air, and then another 75 yards.
If that,
Okay.
I don't know if it's even 75. Yeah, it's
So it was like a 100-yard shot or something?
maybe.
Yeah.
That's still nothing.
That's bare sights.
Right,
Yeah.
except there's a gigantic oak tree blocking the window from where the actual car was at the time. The oak tree was cut down famously by somebody in the government 3 months later from the Parks Department after that was happening. But the rifle itself gets into a raging debate on Wikipedia where they're locking out editors, which is a similar story that we've just recently heard about Wikipedia. And when they locked it out, the last entry, I traced the longitude and latitude, Tim, to the last entry, and it was Langley, Virginia.
This says photos show Oswald with a carbine, not full-length rifle.
Yeah.
Is that just speculation from some user?
Well, the rifle that they found was a German Mauser, and Walter Cronkite for 2 nights on the CBS Evening News said the rifle is a German Mauser. There's 3 cops who get the rifle. It is a German Mauser. We know it's a German Mauser because Seymour Weitzman, one of the Dallas police officers, actually owned a sporting goods store that sold rifles. And it's stamped German Mauser right on the rifle. The Carcano comes in later into the storyline. The Carcano mysteriously appears out of nowhere, and that becomes Oswald's rifle. They also find on the roof of the Texas School Book Depository a .301 British Enfield rifle, also on the roof, and they lower that down through the fire escape with Dallas cops carrying it down. There's film footage of that.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Culture War podcast. We're live every Friday, 10 a.m. to noon, so subscribe and come hang out.